All right, so we should be recording. And here comes someone. All right, welcome. Well, and thank you. Thank you for joining on a Monday afternoon, Monday evening, and welcome. Welcome to our post-secondary readiness school funding subcommittee. This is our meeting 2, our second meeting. Thank you again for agreeing to serve and to help us envision our future funding in Tennessee. And I'm Janice Fox. I work for the Tennessee Department of Education. I'm a director for the Middle Tennessee Grand Region. I serve Upper Cumberland, South Central, and Mid Cumberland, and I'm happy to be facilitating these conversations with you, really helping facilitate these conversations to help us create that future funding for the state of Tennessee. Our chair, so Dr. Randy Boyd is the subcommittee chair for this committee. I'm so sorry we had some misstating of that in our meeting 1, but it is Dr. Randy Boyd. He could not be with us on the first meeting or this one, but we'll be able to, we believe, moving forward. It's Dr. Anita Ricker is filling in as our chair, our vice chair, to help us facilitate conversation and move through. I'll be helping guide and support her and to be hands-free. So I'll be sharing screens and we'll just engage in conversations and brainstorming to help us as we toggle through. All right, I think we have a few more with us. I will go ahead and start with our our preamble to help us begin each of our meetings. This is really to help us think about not the past BEP and the current BEP that we have, but really help us to start clean and have that fresh future forward vision and creating a state funding, student-based, student-centered funding approach in Tennessee. So the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department is going to read this each time. Conversations on the topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revisiting the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level and at what cost. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula. Well, all committees and subcommittees and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly. Documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act, and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. So thank you for bearing with me in just reading through that. But it really is designed to help us think about a new funding formula and what that can look like to help our students reach the highest of possibilities and opportunities. I'd like to kind of go through, I think, everyone that's with us. I think I'll give you just a second. If you can wave at you. There's not many. So Chris Richards, you're here with us. Thank you. Dr. Ricker, thank you for filling in as vice chair. Hello, Tracy Hall. How are you? And Lisa Smith-Gall.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. And Andy Davis, welcome. Thank you. All right, so we will move into some of our discussions and catch up a bit. So we wanted to kind of revisit some of the friendly reminders of what we were from our last meeting, which was just a week ago. And so I know that's rather quick. Sometimes that's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, when you're making some of these decisions, we will be able to pull in lots of robust brainstorming opportunities, and I appreciate that. But we still owe you a couple of items from our last meeting, and we'll get to that as well. But I want to, for us to really have conversation around maximizing your experience, making sure that you review the PowerPoint deck that was provided. You should have access to the one that was an overview. This document was also loaded in your link. And then just we'll pause a moment to see if you've had an opportunity to engage with stakeholders, and solicit any other feedback. I'll kind of kick it over to you, Dr. Rick, to engage in any conversations, or I know just what you've been able to solicit on your own.
So did anyone find any best practices or have time to reach out? Or we're all drinking through a fire hose right now and trying to figure out what we've got ourselves into. You know, one end of the spectrum or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask a question. How many are very familiar with the old BEP formula? So that may be a good thing for this committee, that we literally start from square one.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move into this, we truly will look at what is best, or what we see that kids need coming into post-secondary, what kids need coming into the workplace. And it doesn't mean that we can't look at some, as we were talking earlier, some basic needs that we should guarantee everyone. Again, you and I, we have the PowerPoint, we have some data that we can look at, but would it be appropriate to just look at what we think would be a list of basic needs and see how that aligns perhaps with the concepts that are there in K through 12 now? Or do we want to save that for a little bit later on in the slideshow?
Yeah, we can toggle right on to that. Let me
Okay.
run through. You just, yeah.
So
again,
what do you feel like as a parent, as a grandparent? What is a basic need that we should provide every child within the state of Tennessee? And I'm going to try to take some notes here as well.
Thank you.
And if it doesn't work, this is the part where you all talk, you know.
Well, I think basic needs, of course, safety, a safe environment. So in all the buildings, the infrastructure, playgrounds, all of that they have a safe environment inside and outside of the classroom. I think that's basic, healthy food options. So if we're just talking the basics that I would expect. Of course, we haven't gotten into the academic portion of it, but just basically, that for my child, I have 3. Well, they're grown now, but I would expect that they would be in a safe environment, and that they would have healthy food options for lunch. And I mean, there are a lot of other things, of course, but I'll just start off the conversation with those 2 basics.
No, I think that's good. If without some of those basic needs, you know, we create an environment that it wouldn't really matter how well prepared we are academically. Physically, some of those could be some real challenges. So, and safety, I think, has been an even more challenging area for K through 12, as well as higher ed in the last few years, obviously. So, good points. Anyone else?
The only thing I can think of that, you know, I think sometimes our kids learn differently. So the ability to be able to adapt to the learning needs of our children should be met, you know, as they are. Especially, I got a dyslexic child, so their ability to be able to learn is different than somebody else, and so they need those different tools or different measures to help them be successful.
Okay.
And I was going to add similarly to that, and I have grandchildren, so I'm thinking about that. I know that different classroom ages maybe need different resources of numbers of teachers or assistants to the student population, because in any group of students, you have some that are ahead and some that are not, and some that are in the middle. And you don't want the ones who are ahead to get bored in the classroom, and you don't want the ones who need the extra assistance to become farther behind. So however that, this is not my forte, obviously, but somehow that we can meet the students' needs in all the classrooms with the right numbers of resources so that we're keeping everybody moving in the right direction.
Is that people or rigor within the classroom or both?
Yeah, I don't know if it's knowing where all the students are so that and maybe you have different plans for different groups, trying to get the same class objectives. Again, I don't know. It might be people, because I think that, and I think my daughter is a teacher as well. She's a pre-K teacher in North Carolina, but she tells me stories, and she has some really challenging students as well, that her other two students suffer because she has to put so much attention potentially to these students. So somehow, obviously, they need to get the students that need a little bit more support and help to survive, obviously, or to thrive. I want to say that sometimes their home life is what's the reason they're not doing well in the classroom. And how do we do those kind of assessments and have the right resources there so that those students are as successful as those who come from a different environment and who are well prepared and have a lot of support at home, those kind of things.
Okay. Chris, you're being really quiet there.
Well, I kind of look at it from a point of view is that the physical environment for the students, not just the safety, but they have to have access to appropriate resources, whether it's books or it's technology or it's supplies or it's the additional attention. That whole environment needs to be tailored to meet their needs, not necessarily, some standard that is just put out there as a way of saying, okay, well, we're going to fund this and this and this. One of the things I've seen us struggle with, and it became really an imperative during the pandemic, is there was a real absence of technology in most of the schools in Shelby County. And I think it may have been even worse in some other parts of West Tennessee from what I can tell. And that's we've got to be ahead of it. The best time for students to learn about technology is when they're young. They do better with it. So I think it's just the environment. We need to make sure we're setting up the correct basic environment.
So going back to just kind of review some of our questions, do you feel like that's a must-have or that's a nice-to-have?
I think it's a must-have because I don't see how they can succeed if the environment doesn't, address those overall processes.
Do you feel like the concept sometimes of technology, well, that's a luxury, kids don't necessarily need that? Like you said, maybe that's for older kids, not for younger kids.
Well, I think there's obviously it's different as you take the ages of the kids. I mean, nobody ever learned to write at a computer. Somebody put a pencil in your hand and showed you how to write when you were, young. On the other hand, I think one thing that has harmed us in the long run has been that we've said, okay, technology is nice to have. Then the pandemic made it clear that the technology was essential. And the biggest problem we have is somewhere around 15% of our students logged in during the entire time they were remote.
Okay. As a mom of a teacher, also, I'm gonna flip just a minute. So we've said that's technology is a basic need for the kids and the safety and all that, but what's a basic need for the teachers? How can we provide that to teachers to support it? So if we had all that basic stuff for the kids, what will the teachers need as a part of that?
Oh, the teachers have to be in on this completely. They have to have technology resources, and they also have to have the support. Our education process for teachers, I think, struggles with making sure that the teachers, when they graduate, have enough background so that they can take advantage of technology. And nothing's worse than being, put in a situation where you're supposed to be dealing with the technology and you've got no hope of getting it right because you haven't had any help. So it's got to work for everybody.
Sure.
I agree. I think teachers are, I do worry about when we talk about now with teacher shortage and if how much more of that we're going to see when you think about what teachers really um, went to school for, but what the reality of their jobs really are. And all of the needs that students come to them with that they may not have prepared for during their academic studies, but they face it in the classroom every day. And then some of the experiences, I'll just say it like that, that they have with parents who are unrealistic about their students' abilities or unbearable in how they talk and treat teachers.
Amen.
I just don't know if that would be a career that would be one that you really would. How do you make that career desirable when you see what they have to face for the salaries that they earn? So there just has to be more support for teachers and understanding of their day-to-day lives in the classroom and how complex their jobs are. And I think people, they've gone to school years ago and they say, well, this is what my teacher used to do, so why can't you do the same thing? Well, life has changed, things have changed, and they just need more support. I'm not saying that all teachers are great. Don't get me wrong. As an educator, I know I'm biased, but I know that there are some challenges. But sometimes I think an institution can make a teacher become a bad teacher. I don't think people go into education saying, how can I hurt kids? How can I just provide them with the worst educational experience possible? I don't think they go into it like that, but over a period of time, you just get disgruntled and dismayed, and all of that just adds up. And so, how can we prevent that teacher burnout? They do need a lot of support.
I would add something we've learned, or we haven't learned it, we're working on it, but certainly the pandemic has really brought forth a lot of stress to work environments across the board. And some of the things that are taught for whatever vocation, and teaching would be one of those. I think you teach them the principles of education and how to teach subjects and how to emotionally evaluate children and that kind of thing. But do we teach them? And if we don't do this in the academic environment, then maybe it is a school system kind of educational requirement where you teach them sort of like resilience training and appropriate skills to deal with certain situations. And do we do those kind of things actively in the educational environment? I don't know the answer to that, but case study kind of activities, when parents or children do this, how would you react, and teach them how to handle those difficult situations? Because I can see new teachers, much like new nurses, that it's not what they thought it was going to be, and they walk away before they really try to do the kind of work that they trained for or got educated on, because we haven't given them the skill set to transition to be an effective educator.
Okay. I think it's, I deal with a lot of companies and a lot of corporate training, and I really like the statement that if we take care of our employees, they take care of our customers. So we take care of our teachers, they'll take care of our students, who is the customer for the educational system.
And another thing I would add too, because you asked what do teachers need, I think teachers need the resources. I know we hear lots of different stories about the teachers that invest so much of their own personal, finances and everything else because they want to give a better educational experience to the students, and there's no funding potentially for that. So I don't know if there's a place in this funding strategy to have more like classroom support dollars as well.
And I don't know, not being in K through 12, how this exactly works, but from an outside of K through 12 lens, it appears that the teachers are more, I don't know how much they play into determining even what is taught and what is focused on. It feels like that comes from some entity outside of educators, and that concerns me if that is true. About what's important, what do students really need to know, and to help prepare them for the next level. I mean, these are folks that have gone to school and they're educated in this area to help students grow, but I just don't know how much they inform what needs to be focused on at each level. And maybe that does occur. Um, and I just don't know, but if that's not occurring, that would be, I think, something that I would hope to see, that we would see more of the people that are that have their expertise and their degrees and their training in youth development and academics, really informing what students need, as opposed to people that have not had that expertise but think they know what students need to learn.
Okay. Anything else? I think from a standards standpoint, for the most part, it's set somewhere else, and sometimes it's by educators and sometimes it's by people that think that sounds good, that looks good on paper. So maybe some combination. And as far as, curriculum, the teachers are pretty much handed the standards. I'm not sure that they have a whole lot of input on that. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going from the mom perspective here. They're kind of given the standards, but they do have some access to like curriculum committees and things like that, where they may have some influence on textbook selection.
Yeah, I can hop in there. We do have but ahead of standards adoption or in standard refinements, there are similar to this process where those are posted and we solicit lots of feedback to help inform our standards. So we definitely, we want and we have a process to have that feedback and to refine those and to make sure those are Tennessee specific. Those are also then legislatively connected. So we have those standards are really our guideposts and marks to help us strive to support our students, right? And our Tennessee standards. And then high quality resources, we've created some processes that help ensure that the materials that they have meet those high quality. So what you're saying is feels really good. Yes, we do need those procedures in place to help ensure that we have great resources and that those are aligned to help us meet the expectations of standards, and then never losing sight of where our students are in working toward those. So those are really great comments. And I'll layer this over because it's a visual that's similar to one that is in your larger deck, that larger
Boys.
There's a slide that's got the triangle, and there's a couple of slides that speak to each of those categories that you're really talking through there when you think about that base. So as these committees meet, they're definitely talking through and soliciting the feedback, and every subcommittee will be thinking, just as you are, of what should be a part of that base funding for all students. So what is the no matter where a student lives, what are their needs to be successful in Tennessee? And then as we get a little more specific about the weights and thinking through what are some of those specific subgroups, and there's some examples in your larger slide deck that would say, so economic disadvantage needs, students with EL, students with disabilities, various specific needs that you might want to have more of a weighted value. And so talking through some of the direct funding would be dollars allocated to students for specific programs. And thinking with this group from that post-secondary perspective, there may be post-secondary readiness and business. There may be some gaps or some things that you're thinking to help support that transition. So I'll kind of pause there and we'll come back to, are there any specific that come to mind on this same kind of brainstorming idea? Are there any things that come to mind specific to, from your lens, with that post-secondary readiness needs that really would stand out to you? Some things that you would want included.
So I would like to see more of the introduction of potential work activities in the school system. just at where, and I know that they probably have career days or whatever, but if they're after hours, kids may not stay for them. I don't know what that is, but I think that even having some, I know that there is a lot of in school where you have the dual training where you can get high school credit and college credit, but maybe there's some programming where you can have different work entities. Obviously, I'm coming from a healthcare lens, but people coming in and really teaching people about what the job is and actually practicing the job, and maybe even having time. And I know there's work study programs in some areas, but I know they're also limited by the fact that students may not have transportation to those areas. And maybe we can incorporate some really alliances with work study programs that don't exist today that can say, if you really want to learn about this kind of career or this kind of career, you get this many hours, and the partners can either come into the schools or they can go to the partner places and they can get credit for it if they have specific objectives. And it might actually provide some on-the-job training a little bit so that they can work while they're, in school, if that is something that they need, very short periods of time, but that it could also build towards their choosing a career that they're going to be more successful in. Maybe it even gives them a chance to try multiple careers.
Yeah. I want to add on to that, just in the fact that I do think that we need to be more engaged in middle schools, career awareness and understanding. But it's also not just the kids, it's the parents. And to help inform them and work with their kids, what their kids' aptitude might be, or where their desires could be, of how they get aligned. So when they get to high school, that they're not waiting till their junior or senior year to figure out where it is, because in the CCTE world, right, or in we're not getting completers. We're not getting folks that are being focused on it that may not be college bound or maybe post-secondary, but they could be so much farther along if they were able to prepare themselves more during those middle school years to figure out exactly where they could go, what the options are, and then when they get to high school, maybe be honing in on a direction.
And to add to that, because when you said aptitude, it made me think of that. I don't know if we do that in Tennessee, if we have universal aptitude kind of tests, because I think that, and I'll tell you from my perspective, that there are some really smart young women and men who choose nursing as a career, and they're really bright, but yet they cannot do it once they come out with that degree because they didn't have the aptitude for it. And if there's probably a lot of people who don't even know about healthcare careers or some other career, that if we actually did aptitude, they'd say, hey, you have the skill set that would make a really good, have you even thought about that? And they don't even know they haven't even considered that. But when you introduce it to them and you say you might be really successful at this, they might be more willing to learn about it, potentially look into it, and then maybe choose a career that they can be therefore really successful in. Because I hate to see students who pick something, one, because their parents thought that would be really good for them, or they're trying to do this, or they thought that was a good thing. They spend a lot of money post-secondary, and then it's not what they thought it was. They don't actually graduate. They aren't successful in a career, and there's a lot of wasted energy. So I don't know if that's something that can be added, an aptitude kind of screening situation, but certainly somehow we can help them match the skill set or skills that they have towards a future career, or at least a few that they could examine and try out.
And to add on to that is, what does the industries look like 4 to 5 years or 8 years after they're graduating, right? What is that? And so both the parents and the children understand that. We need to be more business focused and focused around that. We're developing a workforce. We can't forget that. So we have to be workforce minded. Doesn't matter if it's going to be, a doctor to a carpenter, right? It is, we're building workforces in our education, and we need to figure out how to inform them the best we can. They can be successful.
I would agree with that. I don't think that we talk about workforce early enough, because what we see is once they get to community college or 4-year, I'm at community college, so I'll speak to that. They have wanted to do something sometimes their whole lives. So I'll take nursing, and nursing is our most popular program, and they'll want to be a nurse, but they've not had the preparation to be accepted into the program. They science and math, they say, I don't like it. Well, that's going to be hard in nursing, or we will have students to actually hate the sight of blood, but they want to be a nurse. So that's not going to be possible in that field. And so having more career exposure at a much younger age and understanding the options and not only the hard skills to prepare them to be ready to go into college, but the as they're called soft skills, but really they're foundational. Just how to work.
Yeah.
And how to be on time.
Mhm.
And I think some of the challenges that we see in higher ed is that we have, and I hate to slam generations because I know everybody does that, but we have students that they've grown up in an era where everyone gets a trophy and everyone gets to participate when they've not necessarily earned the trophy, but they just get it. And so when they have grades and they say you gave me this grade, they have no responsibility for how the grade was assessed. It's just they're upset because they didn't get the grade that they felt that they earned, but they didn't really earn it. And so it's just how do we help students to I know they're little people at the beginning, but they grow up to be these adults that still have this mentality of that they're owed something, and so we struggle with that at the college level on just what is your role and responsibility, because when you go into the workforce or if you start your own business, you have to there are some standards that you have to set.
I'd like to add on to that if I could. And I know I'm talking a lot and I apologize for that, but I think that accountability is kind of what you're talking about. And I think that I can echo that we hire, a lot of new graduate nurses and we're giving them their first job, right? They've never even had a job, many of them, and they don't understand the concept of what Ms. Hall was just saying about coming to work on time and why that's important. And owning their actions when something happens that they did or didn't do. It's just not always received well. And I think that somehow we are missing the boat in teaching people. And I recognize, truthfully, I've seen parents who come to the defense of children and don't want to hold them accountable either. And that's a problem. And I appreciate where teachers are, but I think that somehow we have to get that kind of education in the school if it's not happening anywhere else, so that they can be good workers when they graduate and good team members and good team players, not necessarily, it's not an us or them, but just to be a really good functioning member of the team, because you let the rest down when you aren't accountable. So it's really important for them to be successful in the workforce.
So one of the things we just completed last week was bring your A game to work, which it's the 7 A's. Attendance, attitude, accountability, appreciation, et cetera, et cetera. And Josh Davies out of Denver, Colorado came into Greenville to do the session. And I was impressed that you can teach work ethic, but apparently nobody's doing it. The parents are not doing it, and business owners are not doing it, and the colleges are not doing it, and school systems are not doing it. So I think to make a difference, that's maybe one of the things that we can embed that curriculum in. And we're going to be doing it in a non-credit program at the college level. That's one way. And then we've got some spinoff sessions that we can do. So when our counselors go out, they can do spinoff activities to kind of embed this is the expectations of the workforce or the employer. The other thing I'm going to say that's been really successful is our talented and gifted program, which is middle school. It's been in existence for 30 years, but it always amazes me what they come out of there with. And we had a kid that went to TAG, had an instructor that was an engineer at Molly. He went on, got his degree in engineering, and then went to work for the same instructor at Molly. So, it went full circle for that kid. That doesn't always happen, but he took several different classes during that talented and gifted program to explore careers and then jump straight in high school. So some kids will do that. Some may not have the parents that can afford the tuition, can afford the summer camps. And so maybe that's some additional things during the summer that could be career exploration focused with some industry partners to kind of help guide them and to help them have more choices. And the other thing that's been huge with any age group right now is the virtual reality. The fact that they can try a career in manufacturing, construction, automotive, and healthcare will be available in the same platform in Q2 of 2022. So we're excited about that because we have a lot of healthcare examples of programs. So from Walter State's perspective, I don't know how we roll that back into the funding formula, but you know, those are some things we could do as a college. You know, dual enrollment, dual credit right now, dual enrollment, they can get up to 10 courses between the Give and Tennessee Promise. I think I've got those acronyms right, but they can get 10 courses. So, so again, they can get that at a high school, that's funded, but maybe some of these other options are funded where it's an industry certification, that maybe it's not a credit program, but it is a skill set they need to get a job. We're working with a lot of OSHA certifications and, you know, welding certifications, and, you know, the list goes on and on and on, from electrical to, again, get them enough to get them in something that they like, get the certification, get them in the door. They still may need additional training, but once they prove they can do it, then I think they're well on their way to having a very successful career.
As I agree with that, I'm a proponent of early college, high school experiences, and then middle college. I'm very much so students graduating from high school with sometimes they can graduate with an associate's degree, but at least a post-secondary credential, and they can have a high school diploma and a credential. At least they can begin to work. We have a program. We have an early college, high school in our medical district at a campus, in which our students are able to take. They will graduate with a high school diploma and a degree or credential in a pathway of allied health or information technology. And so those are the types of things that we need, because a lot of times, especially in some underserved areas, students may never go past high school, and they don't see themselves as college material, which I don't know what that means anymore. I think everyone needs a post-secondary credential. And the best way when you have a captive audience really is to do that in the high schools.
Right.
And so those dual enrollment opportunities, those just kind of those opportunities that will allow that student to graduate work ready. And then they can decide to go further. But if they didn't, they would have a credential that they can get a job that pays a living wage. And that's really critical.
Sure. Okay, maybe next slide, in the interest of time, to kind of keep moving through our review slash. So we've kind of talked about the must-have, the should-have, the nice-to-have, and the long shot. And maybe we can save the long shot for a future discussion perhaps, but is there anything back on the must-have or should-have, or even nice-to-have? And again, let me back up. Have any of you had a chance to talk to colleagues or community members to ask these 4 questions? And could we maybe by the next meeting set up our own Google survey and see what we get out of 10 or 15 people that we work with, or parents or teachers or business leaders? Is that something you feel like we could do between now and the next meeting?
Yeah, I would appreciate something like that that's got some structure to it, because I've got people to reach out to, but this has been so open-ended. I have felt like I didn't want to approach them with, you know, without something more specific to say, think about it. Because the people I deal with are business people who, you know, they have limited time and really will be glad to give us their insight, but they can't go through this whole process with us. Then we've got to direct what we want to hear from them.
Right.
Right. So this will be helpful that you're receiving batches. So that should come today. I know today is the day. And so this committee met a little early, it seems, in that process, but you will receive in the link so the calendar invite that you used to get to today's meeting had 2 links, 2 Google Drive links. One takes you to all of the folders, and then the other was a direct link to today. And so in that folder, you will receive a batch of a lot of feedback, and that may also help you in soliciting. So you will organize those into these categories for must-haves. And I think you may find several are falling into the categories of the brainstormed ideas that you were just mentioning. So we'll help maybe refine some of those. But those are coming to us from across the state through all of the town hall meetings. We have Twitter meetings, so they're pulling all of those batches of feedback in so that it can help you then refine those. So I feel like you all are in a great place for that based on all of the brainstorming that you surfaced today, and then your unique perspective with that post-secondary readiness, and then connecting to the workforce and the labor market, so our readiness on the business end as well. So those should be coming today. So I heard mention like a Google something would help you in a survey. I will make a note of that. Tell me more about what might help you. Could be a need as you're sorting through and you want to reach out to others. What would be helpful?
Well, if we had some more structured questions that we could pose to people, get responses, and that way also we probably get some consistency in get back.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Oh, very good. I have captured that. And then on our note taking, so as we'll kind of refine that process together, and this next slide talks about that a bit as you are sifting through all of that information. The chair and the vice chair, you all will, as together, you will facilitate those idea sharing discussion. You've engaged in the initial brainstorming today, and you all did that last week as well. And just thinking through based on your experiences and any feedback you do receive as you reach out to folks. And then kind of categorizing that. So I feel like as we come back, our next meeting, we'll be able to start to surface what are those recommendations, and we'll have some documents that help us, like note taking, just to land those. We want to put those, what percolates up from your reviews, to feel like what's bearing out, and we put that on paper and then start to sift and refine to say what might be. I heard you in your conversations, I heard you say things that, well, all students need this access. All students need to know or need transportation in being able to access some work-based learning opportunities. And I heard you mention all students need exposure to middle school exploration. How might those help pre-populate some interest inventories? And so pulling in some of the things that you all mentioned today, we'll land those in my note catcher. So we have that, and then comparing that to what you sift through and surface. And so that will be our task. So I hope that just coming back around today, that this helped us get a little more clarity on the task. And then I've got the note to pull in any questions that you might want to then refine, and you could use to circulate out to cast that net a little wider, can connect with any constituents and stakeholders who could help you further inform. We definitely value everyone's opinion, everyone's thought here to help us build out that opportunity. This is a real opportunity for our students, our future forward, to help our students in Tennessee.
Are there any teacher association groups that are sending out information already or collecting any information that you're aware of?
Yes, absolutely. So we have 18 of our subcommittees. There's a teacher group, there's a principal advisory. We have there's a chamber group that met earlier. There's another higher ed group as well. So there's a teacher group, I think I mentioned that, but they're just kind of phenomenal. So just a robust casting that net across to get as many perspectives and help look future forward. And then, of course, a committee that reviews across all committees and can help pull that back together. So thank you.
I think what I was looking at is like local teacher association groups, not necessarily these subcommittees, but maybe outside of the subcommittees. Are there any other maybe manufacturing associations or Chamber of Commerce distribution list?
Okay, so
sort of a question and a statement at the same time.
Yeah.
But that might give us some ideas of some different areas we could reach out to.
Okay, so nice. Let me tease that out. So possibly looking for outreach and any connections with different groups. I will check in with that.
Is all 18 committees, I think 18, going through the same data, the same information that's going to be put in ours, or is it being divided up?
It's yes, it's being divided up to where it will most fit the subcommittee. I'm positive there'll be some overlap, but really sorting that to best suited for the post-secondary group. So for the school system personnel, so I heard you mention ratios and what our teacher needs. So there's a subcommittee focused on personnel and needs. So yes, dividing out the feedback. And as you get information and people begin to solicit, please send that over to tnedu.funding@tn.gov. We want that to continue to add into the circulation so that we can formally collect that information. So tnedu.funding@tn.gov. And again, pulling back on some of the resources, you have the overview slide deck that I think everyone has that. It has a lot of guiding resources there. Also some toolkits. You received a link. You give me a thumbs up if this sounds familiar, but there was a toolkit with a lot of communications. Did everyone receive that? It was a Google link. Okay. If not, please be sure to chat me, send me an email. You should have mine at janice.fox@tn.gov. Oh, G-O-V, not glove. Yeah, so you've got my email handy. All right. So is there anything else then that you think that might be a resource that would be helpful? Just get that batch of data, right?
Get us started.
All right. You also asked, and so I just wanted to flag it that we did make note that you all asked about some statewide data that might tell you what's it look like. We definitely will be able to pull some of that information in for you. So that's still to come your way as well. Our last slide. So our next meeting, we have a minute, December 6th, same time, 5 p.m. Central, same place. You should have a link in your calendar. If you need anything in between or have thoughts, you're like, hey, I thought about this, I would like to reach out, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can have that email as a group or just one-off is just fine. All right. Dr. Vickers, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Y'all have a happy Thanksgiving next week.
Yeah, you do too.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.